You're transforming the country, and there's a lot of a win-win situation that it will accrue to it.
There are recommendations is given that are particularly targeted at government and the political class because they are matters of the constitution.
For the past 20 years, since the community administration, that's at the national level, they've been talking about empowering the citizen through title. Why are they talking about that? When you have title, you have certificate over your property, you can go facility in the bank or another thing.
And that's the new Nigeria. Continue Kingsley and Kirik.
Reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Our business correspondent, Kolo Mohammed, tells us of the role of local content when the African Free Trade Area Agreement takes off effectively.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us at this time. The African Continental Free Trade Area is bracing up to revolutionize manufacturing across the continent. The manufacturers in Africa must brace up if gainful competitiveness is their target. A lawyer turned manufacturer says her drive is premised upon federal government's declaration and support for local content.
A message to Mr. President because he triggered us to do this, and we hope to get all the supports we can from them. The military shouldn't be going outside to do anything. See, these are their boots. Yeah, locally manufactured. If you get that, can you help me get that shoe? No, the shoe, the police. Look at this, you won't believe they're made here. Police shoes, we make everything here.
Wow, there you have it. Made in Nigeria, Nigerians for our world. Now, FD, the government expert talks about what needs to be done and how.
The farmers of tomorrow are today's youth. Okay, if you look at the average age of farmers in Nigeria.
See you again soon.
Thank you, Kolo Mohammed, for that business report. And next is newspaper review.
Newspaper reviewer Bayo Atoebe is right here with us in the studios for today's session. Bayo, good morning and welcome.
Thank you, Kingsley. Good morning. Good morning, Kirian.
Kingsley,
good morning, Nigeria.
Bayo, you're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, about 5 newspapers to review this morning.
Absolutely, yes.
Well, let me begin with the Blueprint newspaper. Blueprint newspaper, that's on the right-hand side of the nameplate. We have ex-Savannah sugar workers get 1 billion severance benefit. It's on page 16. And just below that, Anambra pastor rejects 4 million seed offering from Yahoo boys. That's strange. That's on page 5. Now, below the nameplate, we have change government via elections, not revolution, says the presidency. That story is on page 16. But it has there are 2 writers to that. Why we arrested Shore DSS. The Shore not plotting coup, says Wole Soyinka. All of that on page 16. And now the lead story on Blueprint this morning. Expert unveils remedy for prostate cancer. It's on page 8. And the lead story says federal government earmarks 2.2 billion naira for ROGA implementation. The rider policy won't fulanize Nigeria, says NI. It's on page 6. And at the foot of a Blueprint this morning, we have some stories. Overseas medical treatment. Tension as El Zazaki knows fit today. It's on page 13. Now, Omahe petitions South African envoy over Simeon's murder. Page 9 is where you get that story. Ogun fish farmers lament 300 million naira stock loss to flooding. It's on page 17. 81 headers.
Project, and it comes with a kicker. Buhari's advisor, Ita Enang, gives insight on grazing project. 2.2 billion naira already in 2019 budget for Ruga. That's the headline, with 2 riders. Cardinal Okoje, Yakasai, former ministers and others disagree over implementation plan.
It's not allowed in Rivers State. Omoyele Sowore was a presidential candidate of African Alliance Congress, AAC, he polled 33,953 votes. He was the 10th in the order of the highest votes in that election.
Yeah, but thank you very much indeed. But I'd like to take you back to the issue of Nigerians being killed in South Africa and what may have prompted, the disagreement between the governor and the South African authorities. That may be basically because of the activities of some Nigerians living in South Africa. You recall that some Nigerians kill Nigerians in South Africa. And of course, the incident of last year, that happened in the church in Anambra State in Nigeria. It came over from South Africa. So there may be basis for argument on the part of South African people, because they may have the dossier of the characters, of certain characters of some, not all Nigerians. There are Nigerians, very good Nigerians living in South Africa who are doing genuine business, legitimate business, and are doing well as well. But most of these involvement, people who are being killed there, may be traced to some nefarious activities, drug dealing and other activities that are not legitimate, that could lead to killing, because it's like having a cult group. We also know that there are cult groups in South Africa, yes, organized by Nigerians.
In fact, South Africa sometimes can be described as a very, very violent society. It has seemed like this. They used to be worse than that. But specifically, the diaspora office has also said that there are instances that a few bad eggs in Nigeria, among Nigerians living abroad, indulge in anything against the law of their host. And where there is that, they must be accountable to the law. However, all Nigerians should not be painted with the same brush of criminalizing all Nigerians.
Well, the fact that there are instances of what one may loosely refer to as Nigerian on Nigerian violence. South Africa has one of the highest crime rates in the world. Yeah. Violent crime rates, murder, rape, armed robbery, and so on and so forth. And so, unfortunately, Nigerians themselves get to be collateral victims, in the course of some of these instances, plus incidents of xenophobia, which are now targeted attacks against foreigners, Mozambicans, Zimbabweans, Zambians, and especially Nigerians. Again, because the economic numbers are not quite salutary in South Africa today. The economy has been facing severe challenges in a number of years. So that's partly what will explain what's playing out in South Africa. Let's return to the headlines.
Yes, now the Nigerian pilot. Let's go to the Nigerian pilot. Below the nameplate of Nigerian pilot. Nigerian doctor discovers new treatment for prostate cancer. Some pretend. We read that in the other story. That may be something entirely new. We'll find out. Then Khan condemns killing of Enugu Catholic priest. It's on page 43. No to revolution, says presidency. It's on page 8. Election more appropriate for change. That's the rider to that. And now below the photo story here, federal government budgets 2.2 billion naira for Roga. And there are other stories at the bottom. It says DSS moves Shawara to Abuja, may be charged for terrorism. It's on page 8. Deteriorating NAS complex gets 4 billion naira presidential facelift pledge. It's on page 6. Boko Haram fighters killed by NAF jets, hideouts destroyed. And then transform Almajiri system to avoid looming danger, says University Dawn. It's on page 13. NLC says members not involved in Shawara's mass protest. It's on page 5.
Before I take the headline, the Nigerian pilot with regard to the movement of Shawara from Lagos to Abuja. And by the way, Shawara used to be a student union leader in the 90s at the University of Lagos. The headline there says he's been moved that he may be charged for terrorism.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm sure that the appropriate authorities know what to do and how to draft the charges. But it would appear that on the face of it, there's nothing that has happened so far that we can claim or say that it's anything near terrorism. So that if you want to have a tight case, frame your charges appropriately.
Yeah, framing of charges is very important. When Bayo was reading out the meaning of revolution, according to political scientists, right? So I think that's where they draw their inference, based on, what Bayo read out, because when you talk about revolution, it does mean a lot of things, that come from different perspectives. So, like Kingsley said, proper structuring of whatever allegation you're going to put against him, it should be done well, or you lose that at the end of the day.
That's right. Bio,
talking about court orders.
Yeah, I'm just going to take some other headlines and I'll return to you. Daily Trust newspaper. Below the nameplate, there are 3 headlines there. For 2 of them, we've already discussed extensively, but I take one on. That's controversy over Emirates' extra flights to Nigeria. That Emirates now having 4 daily flights into and out of Nigeria, 2 into Lagos and 2 out of Abuja. Details of that story can be found on page 17. Oil states stuck in 1.3 trillion naira debt trap. And right at the foot of the front page there of the paper, medical trip, that's the kicker, Zakzaki to no fate today, that's page 4. Court stops National Assembly from taking over Edo Assembly, that's page 6. Another sad incident again, part of the profile of the U.S. these days, 29 killed in 2 U.S. mass shootings, that's on page 41.
That U.S. shooting in U.S. has become
the second one.
Has become within 24 hours. Yes. I have 2, you know.
Under 24 hours.
24 hours, exactly. Yeah.
Different locations. 29 casualties, and the latest one, that's the price they have to pay for freedom of possessing guns. Meanwhile, Federal High Court at Port Harcourt has restrained the National Assembly, the police, the Department of State from sealing off or taking over the functions of the State House of Assembly. This is sequel to the other interim injunction sought by the Deputy Speaker of Edo State of Assembly and a member representing Ipoba and Oka in the State House of Assembly. Also, Governor Obaseki is also precluded from issuing a fresh proclamation. This perhaps brings to the 2 such interim orders that has been issued on the Edo case. The first was by Benin High Court, which restrained the APC, the Inspector General of Police, the Commissioner of Police Edo State, and the Publicity Secretary of APC from doing anything that will restrain Edo State from carrying out his activities. Meanwhile, the interesting report which Kingsley read there is about oil states among the highest debtors in Nigeria. The report is saying that oil-producing states, and there are 9 of them, have a total domestic debt of about 1.25 trillion as at March 2019. And by that data, the data is from Debt Management Office. There are 9 oil-producing states. Between June 1999 and December 2018, they received a total of 44.68 trillion from Federation accounts. That is in consonance with 13% derivation. And the paper is saying that this is aside from the monthly statutory allocation from the Federation account. So what are the observations? They say for 19 years now, the 9 states have actually earned about 44 trillion. And debt is the consequence of this. And the report is observing that there is a lack of economic planning in their expenditure. There is absence of development specialists. Governments in those 9 states have indulged in building quite relevant projects, and therefore there is disjointed and irrelevance in many of the projects. NATI has also observed that oil money creates a false impression of wealth, and therefore they are advising the states to take loans for only things that are needed. The other interesting story I would like to draw attention to is the dean at the science-based faculty of the University of Abuja is reported to be embroiled in another sting operation for a sex for mark award. The Daily Trust reports that a dean was at the hotel in Gwarimpa where he had booked to solicit illicit sex from a lady. The lady had reported to the university security and police, and she was advised to play along. And therefore, they planned a sting operation. The Lugbe police station is the one in charge of University of Abuja, but they work with the Gwarimpa police station, and the dean was promptly arrested. At the university has set up a committee. The dean has been issued a query, and the new vice chancellor, we are told, is a no-nonsense man who has zero tolerance for misconduct.
We were discussing this, before now, because I saw it on the social media, and we're not discussing it, Why has this persisted, Kingsley, over the year? I mean...
Well, it's a topic I believe that we have to examine in greater detail. You recall the story of the Obafemi Awolowo University lecturer who harassed or allegedly harassed a postgraduate student. There was the audio recording of that. And then this one is following for it. So
there was one that followed from you. Is it University of Lagos or Lagos State University?
Yeah.
Soon after that.
Yes, Lagos State University, that's right.
And this one. I think there are two perspectives to it. Students, ladies particularly, and in fact boys particularly who could fall victims of female lecturers, should be encouraged to report such instances.
That's
On the other hand, students too and lecturers too should have the courage to throw out students who come and say, Oga, I like your subject, but I'm prepared to do anything to pass it. I find it difficult. Those are the ones that usually tempt.
I think, as Kinsley said, maybe one of these days we'll have that as a topic and discuss the different perspectives to it. Yeah. Now, let's go to the editorial for today, taken from the New Telegraph. Sanitizing Nigeria's political system. Just one paragraph. Not too long ago, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, announced its desire to prune down the number of political parties in the country. Currently, there are 91 political parties which took part in the 2019 general elections. Of the lot, only the All Progressive Congress, APC, and PDP made a substantial showing in the polls. A few other parties also got some seats, but in all, 91 political parties, not more than 6, won anything in the 2019 elections. Bayo.
Yes, indeed. Of the 91 political parties, only 73 contested the presidential election. Normally, when you are a political party and you don't contest election, why are you in existence? But there have been instances because the idea of deregistering or refusing to register political parties had been on for a long time. If you recall, late Gani Fawemi had in the year 2002 actually challenged the INEC, and when INEC ruled, the court ruled in favor and got the National Conscience Party registered. That opened the floodgate for which many political parties got registration. These days, you have political parties that are described as briefcase political parties. They exist in name, they have offices, but they have no presence across the country. And if anything is, any critical observation, particularly if we have to go by the last election, the editorial is saying many of them ended up endorsing candidates, which means that they had no grounds on their own to contest the election. But don't also forget, in 2013, a federal high court in Abuja said INEC had no business deregistering political parties. It was in conflict with freedom of association. So there comes the dilemma. Political parties need to be registered, but we have political parties that actually exist by name and are not operational. So what do we do?
Well, Bayo, would like to thank you, but just one point before you leave. With regard to the associational right embedded in the freedom of association and the Constitution on which the court ruled at the time, there has been an amendment to the Constitution, and that is to be found in the 4th alteration. And that alteration provides the grounds upon which the electoral management body, in this case, the Independent National Electoral Commission, could deregister political parties. And those grounds are stipulated. There are certain, you must meet a certain threshold.
Criteria.
Yes, for you to continue in existence as a political party. So it's now part of the Constitution.
So
and that
the ball
must be
is
read.
now in the court of INEC.
It's now in the court of INEC. But the only narrow escape that political parties would have is that if they win a chairmanship election in a local council election, for instance, then they escape the hammer.
That is safety valve.
That's a safety valve for them. If they win any seats, in the course of local elections. But those elections are usually, this is part of the conflict. I'm getting to another discussion now.
Another issue, Kinsley, is are you sure that any political party that is deregistered cannot go back to court, to seek for registration? What I may suggest, is a situation where you have, you classify or grade political parties. You can operate at local government level. You can operate at the state level. Everybody must not come to the national level to start campaigning for producing a president when you don't have the wherewithal to do that.
Kirian, you're absolutely right. But then if you examine the details of the 4th alteration, that would, in my opinion, tend to provide that valve. Or if you want to concentrate on local council elections, concentrate on local council elections.
Yes.
And by the way, also, if a state government fails to conduct a local government election, on what basis then can you deregister a political party?
Yes.
And we have a number of states that have not conducted, they have all these caretaker...
Yes, caretaker committees.
All right, Bayo.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for being around. See you tomorrow. Okay, it's Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're taking a short break now. When we return, of course, we'll get ahead with our principal issue for conversation this morning.
They are there at the crack of dawn. They are there busy preparing while we rise for our day.
For today is agenda setting for the new minister. So our correspondent, Kunle Adeye, went to town to feel the pulse of a section of the Nigerian public.
For Ministry of Education, his priority should be to put things in place, make sure we have standard education, because when students have a standard, a good atmosphere for learning, I mean, they can be able to produce a very good graduates or effective student that will be able to stimulate things, make the economy to be robust, and government also giving them that enabling environment, especially the government.
So the Minister of Education particularly must come up with a blueprint that will streamline the activities of the universities, and then make sure that they follow it up properly and ensure that they deliver on quality. They deliver on reforms and transformation that will put us again on the front burner generally.
So now they should think about those below. Those are our graduates that will be waiting for jobs now. Looking at the Ministry of Works, the Ministry of Petroleum, other ministries, transportation, they should find a way of bringing our youth together to give them job opportunities, to make their life better, to make Nigeria great.
From the trade agreement signed by Mr. President recently, the Minister of Trade and Investment need to come up with policies on how we can improve the small-scale industry. Most especially in the case of Abuja, we have other areas where we can encourage our local entrepreneurs to come up with things they can produce so that we can export to other countries, and then we can use it to grow our GDP in the country. And then we also know about security. The police and other paramilitary agencies need to sit up, even the Ministry of Defense.
Performance is very key. And then, most especially from the Ministry of Power, Ministry of Works and Housing, most especially, and then the Ministry of Agriculture, because agriculture, can employ mostly the youth. So, and as a nation, we cannot develop, our country cannot be industrialized without power.
And now with us in the studio to discuss the topic, we have Professor Tahir Maman. Professor Maman is the Vice Chancellor of Bayes University, Abuja. We thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you. Good to be
here. And also with us is Dr. Ernest Reke, Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja. It's a pleasure to have you this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right. Also with us here in the Abuja studios, we'd like to welcome Hajia Binta Muazu. She's a grassroots politician. Hajia Binta, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, and joining us from our Ibadan Network Center, I would like to welcome Professor Oka Martin Obono. He's a professor of sociology and population studies at the University of Ibadan. Professor Obono, pleasure to have you with us on the program.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so gentlemen and madam, let's begin this conversation. The National Assembly, in particular the Senate, which has a constitutional responsibility, has already vetted the nominees for President Buhari's cabinet, and they are waiting inauguration and assignment of their portfolios. Beginning with Professor Tahir Mama, in your opinion, what are the next steps or what are the next issues?
Well, this is one of those few occasions we've had a very smooth, really speedy clearance of cabinet members, and which goes to show the synergy between the National Assembly and the executive this time around. And the potential is actually for speed in governance in the next 4 years. And for me, this is actually a very good omen. That is without prejudice to the position of the National Assembly to maintain some level of autonomy from executive interference in what they are doing there. And the next thing, obviously, is for the government to take off. That is the primary thing. That's why the country has been a bit agitated when there was some delay in the formation of the cabinet. And there are a whole range of issues on ground. Even though this particular government is continuing, is having a second term, but you get the impression that the problems actually have been somehow continue to compound rather than get solved. And so the government needs to take off as quickly as possible. And this time around, we have quite a number of, I think about 14, if I remember the number well, of returning ministers. So those ones, although we don't know yet their portfolio, if the speculation around is that they are likely to go back to most of their places, then they will have very, very little reason actually to go slow on implementing government policies. And you remember the government campaigned on principles of continuity. So the issues are there, although some of them have, some problems have evolved and, become a bit more worrying, like the security component of the country, which seems to be descending to what would appear to be some level of anarchy. And so there's some urgency in the security situation of the country. And there's also the problems relating to the selling point of the president. Somehow the impression went out in the last government that issues of integrity, continued to hang over the government. And even in the process of screening, although it didn't feature much at the screening stages in the National Assembly, but the social media was full of suggestions that some of the members coming to the cabinet really have issues hanging around them, issues of integrity hanging around them. So they will need to, give some assurances to the nation, that they are going to imbibe integrity as a core value, as a core principle, and be so guided. And as it were, keep their nose clean of corruption matters. And for them to, I believe there's a lot of complaints still in the country about public institutions, how insensitive they are, and the regulations, that are really suffocating the country. In spite of all the efforts, the Vice President and the government overall has been doing much in terms of creating, ease of doing business in Nigeria. But out there, you don't seem to get the impression that that is actually the case in practice. And so these are things that we need to work on as rapidly as possible. And we obviously know the infrastructure issues of power, the roads, the railway, apart from what has happened between in the commencement of the railway system in Kaduna and Lagos, Ibadan. Yeah.
All right, Prof. We're going to return to you, when we move into the nitty-gritty of the conversation, where we'll now read some specific issues, as you have pointed out. But I will take two things from what you've said. The issue of continuity and that of integrity. It sounds interesting. Now, the speedy clearance you mentioned, it happened. Nigerians witnessed that, and of course, it boils down to what we now know as the take a bow doctrine. And I'd like to bring in Dr. Reke here, who has a political science background. And the stage is set now, apart from the fact that the new ministers have not been inaugurated. What should be the next step?
Well, having been cleared, it's expected that Of course, they will be inaugurated, but it is heartwarming that we've been told that an orientation program is being arranged for the incoming ministers. And so I want to believe that in that orientation program, the incoming ministers should be made to realize that the country is passing through so much at this moment, and therefore, this is not the usual come and chop. They have not been called and helped. So even if we are believing that it was just a mere ambition just to be made a minister, in that orientation program, they should be made to realize that Nigeria is passing through so much, and it's a very critical period in our national life. Security is, of course, a very worrisome issue in Nigeria. And therefore, in that orientation program, I want to believe that they will tell whoever is going to man the Ministry of Youth, for instance. Of course, that person will not be a young person from what we have seen. Now, whoever will man the Ministry of National Planning and Budget, Ministry of Finance, Education, and all other ministries should be made to realize that the security challenges we are facing in Nigeria today is as a result of failures in the critical sectors of the country, in the economy, in education, unemployment, in agriculture, and what have you. And therefore, that their efforts in manning their various ministries will contribute very immensely towards tackling the security challenges that we have in the country. Therefore, what we are saying is that the activities, the actions, the contributions of various ministries in, for instance, reducing unemployment, in, for instance, reducing the number of persons who are out of school, in, for instance, opening up opportunities in the agri sector, in, for instance, helping to build national integration, nation building at this point, where everybody is talking about regions, everybody is reclining into various identity cleavages, and therefore these ministers should be made to realize that their various contributions, their various activities and actions will contribute immensely towards, of course, tackling the national security challenges that we have in the country. And so irrespective of whatever ministry you are assigned to, you have a very serious task at your hands.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ernest Oreke. Now let's bring in again Binta Muazu.
Yes.
What are your thoughts going forward?
My thought as a politician is that democracy or government of the present government is a government that is meant to be served for the nation, for the people. Invariably, let me say, government is for the people, by the people, and for the people, which means that whatever thing government is going to do should emphasize on giving the right service to the country and to see that they improve the welfare of the people in general. My two colleagues here have made so much emphasis on the values of good governance. And of course, there won't be good governance without peace. So the problem of security has to be tackled. That is the most important thing. And then apart from that, the ministers are the representatives of the president. President cannot be everywhere, but they are the representative of the president, whereby they are expected to discharge their duties according to the agenda or policies of the government. What I want the ministers to know is that they are there not for themselves, but for the people, and to render services that will better all Nigerians. If in general everything is improved, there will be peace and there will be harmony in general. So what I want the ministers to have in mind is to believe that they are there to help all Nigerians, not their own political associates, and not to do anything that at least will increase more insecurity or more unemployment. So, and I'm happy that the government has set an induction program, which is coming up. Through that induction program, some of the ministers that are first-timers will be able to know their do's and don'ts. And those that have been there, coming back for the second time, they will look at it and see where they've not done well, they will improve on that.
All right. It's also interesting to note that most of the ministers are first-timers, right? And they really need such orientation, as you pointed out. And let's go to Professor Oka Martin Obono, Professor of Sociology and Population Studies at University of Ibadan. Of course, we've listened to other guests. Where do we go from here?
Thank you. Where we go from here is to recognize that the screening of the ministerial nominees, which took place in the 9th, obviously left a lot to be desired as far as the optics were concerned. The truth needs to be spoken consistently in order for this country to make good promise of its democratic potentials. The Senate came into existence with an identity sword of Damocles hanging over its head, where it strenuously tried to demonstrate that it would not be a rubber stamp assembly. Now, the optics of the screening process that took place did very little to assuage the anxiety of Nigerians and international observers in that regard. While it is in order to extend courtesy to former legislators and so on, there are other ways of doing that without betraying the trust that is incumbent upon the Senate to also provide civic education on what's happening in the country through the screening process. A situation where people bow and go fails educationally, because then we do not even get a chance as citizens to know what the fundamental issues are, and then also lose the opportunity to invite commentary and contribution by well-meaning Nigerians, because the whole estate of this nation belongs to all of us. And people from different quarters are in a position, whether it's in civil society, academia, or in journalism, are in a position to contribute to that process. We simply lost that opportunity. And then we have heard, I believe, the Senate President saying that we would institute the bow and go situation in the Constitution. That would be a mistake. That would clearly be a dangerous mistake. We can extend courtesy to those we wish to extend courtesy, but we should not deprive the nation. Jeff Sessions, Attorney General of the immediate past Attorney General of the United States, was a senator throughout, and he also commanded the respect and admiration of his colleagues. Yet he was grilled for that office. Hillary Clinton was not only a senator, but a former first lady. So if you are talking about gender friendliness, the idea of asking the female nominees to also bow and go is not the way to actually establish respect for gender. We need to show that those who are going to serve the nation are competent and that they can hold their own. Many of them did so when they were given the opportunity. Festus Keyamo, Babatunde, Fashola, Sunday, Dari. So asking people to just bow and go does very little to respect them. And then even screening people without portfolio, we need to say it. That kind of practice needs to stop. It is, for instance, like in my university, asking people who have finished secondary school to just come in, bow, and then enter any class they like, whether they are qualified for it or not. Or in an aeronautic training center where we are training pilots, instead of giving them a qualifying exam, we ask them to just bow and go. or surgeons or medical doctors. You will kill people that way. So if this is the case, it's almost akin to saying that those who are going to pilot the ministerial affairs of this nation have not yet shown their fit with the portfolios that will ultimately emerge. Screening should be screening in terms of the kind of appointment that you are going to have. So I really think, with due respect, obviously, the nominees that we have, it was a galaxy of stars. Those people are competent, they've done very well, but that's not the issue. The issue is that they needed to have been screened in relation to the portfolios that they will hold. And if that had been done, the kind of conversation emerging from your eminent discussants on your panel there would be the kind of thing that the Senate would have brought to bear in that process. For instance, securitizing all the ministries. If the first function of government is actually, provision and protection of security of lives and property, the agriculture cannot even exist without security. The educational system will collapse, health too, if there is no security. So the ministers could have also had a chance to provide an indication of the security threats that are also affecting the portfolios that they are wielding. So we know how to push resources around, how to prioritize attention in order to ensure that when they then get going, insecurity does not undermine their performance on the job. I think it was a very sad and wasted opportunity that we had there. And it did very little to show the Senate as the last bastion of hope for the common citizen in this country.
All right, Professor Bono, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. Of course, Kirian, you know that this is an issue that has come up repeatedly, especially in the Fourth Republic, with regard to the non-assignment of portfolios to nominees who are to be screened, either as commissioners or as ministers.
There's no reason ever that has been put out as to why you don't assign portfolio to someone that you are screening to man a particular sector. It's for instance, when you hear the senators ask questions, then they will say, assuming you are giving this position, what will you? So I don't know.
I think, as you said, we just might have to get it right at some point that when there are nominees, portfolios are also assigned, which will not preclude the president from reshuffling his cabinet members from time to time. Yeah, but let's return to Professor Tahir Mama. Professor Tahir Mama, when you look at the ministerial nominees who've now been screened and waiting inauguration, it's quite a broad range of experiences and kaleidoscope of different individuals. A number of governors, a number of former ministers themselves, and persons who have made, some successes in whatever areas that they have operated. But the question then arises from what you said earlier. How might the cabinet philosophize the issue of continuity, consolidation, and the clear recognition that this is a legacy term? President Buhari has now less than 4 years. In fact, probably now has 3 years and just about 10 months or so for the remainder of his term. So how do you philosophize this and then use it as a guiding principle for the operation of the administration against the background of what you indicated earlier with regard to security now being an overarching threat to everything else in the country?
Well, thank you. There have been a very loud complaint, actually, in spite of what you have said about the diversity, broad spectrum of the background of the cabinet. But I didn't see economists. I have not seen economists in that cabinet. And there's a loud complaint also from the intelligentsia. Unlike the previous cabinet, we don't have people from the academia there. And yes, there are a couple of people with PhDs, but that's a different matter altogether from having people from really who are into research and ideas generation, generally speaking. And but despite that, I think the starting point is for them to recognize the shortness of the period of the government. They have just barely 3 years now really to work. So that gives some urgency in what they need to do. And by then, the government, at least the president, would have spent 8 years in government. So they have to demonstrate that it's not an wasted 8 years. And all those infrastructure projects which government have put as a priority need to accomplish certain mileage now. Power needs to attain a certain level. You know, by the time the government will be handing over in 2023. And then even for the party, for the APC as a party, for it to have the hope to continue, the government has to deliver. PDP ruled this country for 16 years. And we can't go into what they did or what they didn't do. Now it is the legacy period for the president to show, okay, 8 years, this party has been entrusted with power. This is what it's been able to achieve. And in terms of also coordination of the nation, you know, a lot of times we tend to focus attention on federal government, whereas 50% of expenditure and governance happens at the state level. But the federal government needs to coordinate to some extent, although I say to some extent because some of the states are governed by other parties, so it cannot direct. And even in the nature of intergovernmental relationships, it has to be a sort of persuasion. And something gratifying is happening. I think if I remember well, the Office of the Secretary of the Government has been coordinating with the other states, Secretary of the Government of the states, coordinate policies, you know, and that's how it should be. There are certain areas of the economy where the role of the federal government is actually to set policy and framework. And for federal government will key in, states will key in, especially those areas on the concurrent legislative list of the Constitution. And even in those areas where the federal government actually have exclusive responsibility, there's a way it can delegate a lot of authority to the states and even the federal governments, which are federal government agencies which are operating at that level. So there's so much which can be done through this coordination. And then the area of justice. Much of what we are having now, experiencing in terms of security, has to do with failure of our justice sector. You know, in terms of the workings of the judiciary, they seem to be so, in terms of orientation, as I have said many times and at different fora, those managers justice sector need to understand, have a different orientation of their role. Yes, people have rights, individual rights must be respected, but we need to recognize that, you know, the first right is that of the country as a nation. You know, so we need to understand that the most important thing is for us to secure and ensure justice for Nigeria, you know, as a country. And so in a situation where there's too much focus on protecting criminals, allowing criminals to use the shield of justice to protect themselves. For instance, all those cases which are lying around in the hundreds in courts, you know, as a result of corruption and all that, shouldn't be there. These trials should be concluded within 1 year, if not less. So there should be a serious conversation between the Attorney General, you know, and the heads of various courts in Nigeria to work out rules of court that will ensure that cases are dispensed with as quickly as possible. And then part of the problem, self-help, we seem to be noticing around the country. You know, militia all over the place, you know, ethnic, you know, resort to self-help. All these are really, they underscore the failure of the justice system. Because if somebody is arrested, for instance, for robbery or kidnapping, and then he can have his day in court within 3 months or 6 months, people will see that justice has been done. So there will be no need for anybody to resort to self-help. So there has to be a serious conversation at that level between, as I said, the executive, represented by the Attorney General, and the heads of the courts in Nigeria. And then issues of unemployment. By official statistics, we have about 21 million people right now out of job in the country. Now, this is, most of it have to do with graduates from universities. But I always prefer to look at the figures from WAEC and from JAM. You know, every year, about 1.7, 1.8 people, students do their JAM, and barely 10% of that number get admitted into universities and polytechnics. The rest are all within our community. And it is worse, of course, with secondary school, where millions and millions of people are affected. Where are they? You find them all over the place. That's why when there's a traffic problem out there, before you know it, you find tens and tens and hundreds of able-bodied youth. So this is a big-time bomb, which the government needs to pay attention to.
Okay. Oh, all right, thank you. You've raised a good number of issues here, you know, from judiciary to education. And let's return to Dr. Reke once more. In your opening comments, you made mention of failures of critical sectors of the economy. And in this country, it's never been a challenge when it comes to policy articulation or developing of blueprints and what have you. But what the nation has witnessed over the years, perhaps a poor implementation of such policies is in so many, in all strata of our national life. We have uncompleted projects, abandoned projects, projects that were allocated huge sums of money. And at the end of the day, nothing is shown. I heard the chairman of the ruling party saying that they will give no more excuses to Nigerians as it is at the moment. And the Nigerians are now expecting for them to deliver. And of course, even the immediate past Minister of Transportation also said the same thing. What should we expect, you know, going forward with respect to the way and manner the cabinet should carry out their responsibilities to ensure that at the end of this tenure, that Nigerians will be celebrating some level of development in all sectors of our national life?
Well, I think even the president himself has told us what to expect, and we want to believe that he will be a man of his words. When he said that in the next administration, his next administration, that he is going to be scaling things up. And then, of course, we know that the campaign slogan was next level. And therefore, we expect that things should be higher, implementation of policies, execution of projects, implementation of the national budget also should be better than we saw in the last 4 years. Presentation of the budget should be earlier than we saw in the last 4 years, so that the National Assembly can go through the entire process of appropriation, scrutinizing the bill before it is passed into law. So we expect that this time, as Kingsley rightly said, this is a legacy period for Muhammadu Buhari. If he doesn't leave a legacy this time, then all the while that he has been struggling to become Nigerian president will be a wasted effort and time. And so it is expected that this time around, he will be very hard on the ministers to ensure that they deliver to the promises, to the campaign promises, to the manifesto, to the programs contained in the APC manifesto. And so I expect that this time around, if there is a minister that is a weak, the weak link in the chain, I'm expecting that the president should drop such a minister, because he really doesn't have the time again. We are talking about barely 3 years. And we know that within the 3 years, by 2021, everybody is already talking about the next round of elections. And so people will no longer be looking up to the president. People will be looking up to those who will be angling to become, next president. And so I expect that this time around, the president should be very, very hard on these ministers to deliver, because this is the only opportunity he has to leave a lasting legacy in Nigeria.
Dr. Oreke, thank you. I just tempted to go very quickly to Professor Obono in our Ibadan Network Center. Professor Obono, in addition to all the issues that have been raised, including the ones that you also pointed out, I was just wondering, if we frame President Buhari's second term now as the legacy tenure, what would you like to see in the management of the political economy, considering all the matters that will most likely arise, as Enrique just drew our attention to? By 2021, everybody is talking about succession, which will be 2023. So effectively, you have just 2 years, and all the issues surrounding security, who will take over, who will not take over, which zone will bring president, which zone will not bring president. So for the remainder of the period, for effective governance, what would you like to see?
I have a fundamentally different orientation about what this period and this tenure in this highly promising administration portends. I'm usually uncomfortable when the question of legacy becomes the primary focus of governance, in which case it becomes idiosyncratic. The targets that are set without intending to become self-serving, it becomes egotistical. We should set aside the issue of legacy for now. What we need to do is the right thing on a daily basis. 90.8 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty. And I dare say the number is higher, because that calculation is based on World Bank computations of those who live on less than $1.6 per day, which actually works out to 20,000 naira per month. And until April this year, even those who were working were earning a minimum wage of 18,000 naira. So, in other words, far more than 90.8 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty. The eradication of poverty, indeed, is the first of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Legacy becomes a very secondary issue when we realize that we need to get them out of that condition immediately. We need to put the children of parents who find themselves in those conditions in school and guarantee their continued stay there, because that will be the legitimate pathway out of recycling that poverty. We need to instantly reassure Nigerians that Nigeria itself is a worthwhile enterprise, that the insecurity, massive, with many manifestations in the forms of insurgency in the northeast, militancy, secessionist tendencies, Nigeria is now speaking a language which used to constitute political heresy. People can freely and glibly say they want out of this nation. This is very dangerous, at the very least, extremely disturbing. We need to spend this term to stabilize this. Justice is an issue, as we've just learned, but the economy too. If you look at the relationship between education and the market in Nigeria, that model, which I shall quickly describe, can only produce the massive unemployment we find. That people grow up in one institution, namely the family, and then when they get to a certain age, they are transferred to a secondary institution, in this case, a school. And then after they graduate, ultimately, you then expect them to find employment. That model can only create a backlog of unemployed graduates. So we need to bring that economy, that market, that private sector together with the educational process. Look at some countries are already creating solar panels and, in fact, thinking of exporting to countries like Nigeria, and these are African countries. We have engineering departments in virtually all universities in this country. Why can the curricula of these engineering departments, for instance, not be geared towards the production of consumable panels and inverters and batteries that we can export to the rest of West Africa and consume at the subsistence level, so that while the students are learning, they are earning at the same time?